Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. Our headlines. Another day of protests and political uncertainty in Kenya. As the country prepares for a rerun of a presidential vote, a judge ruled that all 8 candidates can run in the race. The news brings fresh uncertainty a day after the opposition leader Raila Odinga said he would not participate in the vote. And almost a year after a deadly train crash in Cameroon that killed 79 people, compensation claims continue against the train operator Camrail. A court hearing took place today. We'll bring you the latest on that later in the show. And Wednesday was International Girls' Day, and France 24's sister radio network RFI was in Abidjan in Ivory Coast, in part to mark that event. We'll bring you more on that later also. Hello and thanks for watching. Now we start in Kenya. The country has been in political chaos since a presidential election was cancelled last August because of irregularities. The rerun of that vote is scheduled for the 26th of October. But the opposition leader Raila Odinga said Tuesday that nothing has changed since the last vote and he will not run. Today, the Electoral Commission said that all 8 candidates can run to discuss a day of high tension in Nairobi. We spoke a little bit earlier by phone, by Skype rather, to Julia Steers. Let's take a listen.
If this announcement holds, it will nullify a law that was pushed through Parliament just today, which ruled that if one of the candidates withdraws from the race several weeks before the election, that the Electoral Commission can then declare the only remaining candidate, in this case, President Kenyatta, the winner. But the consequences for Odinga remain unclear. We also heard from the Electoral Commission late today, Wednesday, that Odinga, while he made this big announcement yesterday withdrawing from the race, he sent them a letter saying that he was withdrawing from the race. He has not actually technically withdrawn from the race because he has not signed a specific form and submitted that to the Electoral Commission that says that he is out of the race.
So Julia, is the concern that if we have more candidates that the vote could be split and that this would be bad, say, for Odinga, even if he does run?
Indeed, the concern on his side, on the opposition side, is that it would divert the votes from him, that he would be running with his opposition coalition, and that additional candidates in the race would, of course, dilute the votes away from him. Also, from a logistical standpoint, the Electoral Commission has already said that if more candidates enter the race, that it will be highly unlikely they can print ballots by October 26th. So they said that yesterday, and then, of course, them allowing new candidates into the race just today muddies the water a bit.
Okay, and Julia, for those who haven't been following the drama that has been going on for weeks now in Kenya, can you give us a little bit of background as to why that August vote was cancelled?
The August 8th election was nullified by the Supreme Court after Odinga brought charges of what he called massive rigging and electoral fraud to the Supreme Court after weeks of encouraging his supporters to protest. The court ruled on September 1st that there were enough illegalities and irregularities in the vote tallying and transferring of the vote tally to declare the election null and void. It's important, though, to note that Odinga had accused President Kenyatta of rigging the vote and that the court found no specific wrongdoing. They said it was just technical issues that rendered the vote null and void.
And finally, Julia, there were supporters of the opposition, mostly Odinga, I presume, who took to the streets again today, and reports of injuries. Can you tell us more about that?
There were widespread protests today here in Nairobi, his supporters saying that they were out in the streets to fight for more reforms and that there needed to be more time for reforms before the elections could be held. There were several deaths in the city of Kisumu, which is an Odinga stronghold. There were also some scuffles with police here in Nairobi, but here in Nairobi, things were a bit calmer than they have been in protests in the days past.
To Central African Republic next, which was recently accused of being a, quote, pre-genocide state. Those remarks were made by the then aide chief for the UN, Stephen O'Brien. In August, he said he was deeply worried about mounting violence in the country. But on Wednesday, the UN Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide disagreed with that assessment. Adama Dieng said there is no programme by any group to exterminate another group, therefore no grounds for using the term genocide or pre-genocide. Central African Republic has seen intense fighting, though, stemming from competition for minerals and other natural resources by armed groups. South Africa's largest port remains closed on Wednesday after a severe storm lashed the coast around Durban, resulting in at least 8 deaths in the province, local officials say. These three vessels were grounded, containers were blown into a bay, and mooring lines were broken due to the high winds. Speaking to Reuters, a spokesman for the Durban port said it was still too early to assess the full extent of the damages. Durban port is a key transit point in sub-Saharan Africa for commodities such as maize. To Cameroon next, where almost 1 year ago a deadly train accident took place in Iseka, that's 120 kilometres from the capital Yaoundé. Some 79 people perished and hundreds more were injured. On Wednesday, a second hearing took place in the appeals court of Iseka to establish the responsibility of Camrail in compensation claims by victims and their family members. Camrail is majority owned by the French conglomerate Bolloré. Our reporters in Cameroon have been following the case.
A working-class neighbourhood in the suburbs of Douala, the economic capital of Cameroon. We meet with Juste Ntundi at his family home. He's a young student who almost died in the derailing of the 152 Camrail train a year ago.
This is the root of all my problems. This operation makes my life difficult.
Severely wounded, he had to have a bone marrow transplant, which cost around €2,000. His parents have had to fork out the money because rail operator Camrail is yet to compensate him in the wake of the tragedy. An official inquiry found the Bolloré Group subsidiary responsible for.
I can't move my head from side to side, and I can only sleep in one position, on my back. I can't read because I get horrible headaches, and I can't feel things in the same way that other people do.
This is the central station of Douala, where the train never arrived, where the battle for compensation begins. For this man, it's the start of a lengthy procedure put in place by Camrail, which includes medical examinations and other assessments in order to apportion blame. A year later, only a quarter of the more than 1,300 victims registered have been compensated. Tardiness that is justified by the complexity of the procedure, if one believes the lawyer of the insurers.
For deceased victims, it takes a little longer. The question of inheritance must first be resolved for family members. They sign a memorandum of understanding, then the judge must approve the documents. And for children who lost their parents, another judge must also verify this agreement.
These compensation agreements are being signed pending the outcome of the trial opened in Iseka, the city where train 152 crashed. The court now wants to determine criminal responsibility in the worst rail accident ever to occur in the country.
Léane de Bosson-Pierre reporting there. Now, 7 milliards de voisins, or 7 billion neighbours, is a well-known show on the RFI network, RFI being France 24's sister radio channel. Today, listeners in Ivory Coast were treated to a live broadcast in the economic capital, Abidjan. It was also an opportunity for Radio France International to present the prize for its app challenge, which rewards the creation of a citizen-centred smartphone application in Africa. And this year, the judges gave the award to the designer of a digital service for girls, coincidentally, on the International Day of Girls. Let's take a look.
7 milliards de voisins, nous sommes à Abidjan. Salut les voisins.
RFI listeners are accustomed to this familiar jingle. But for the first time, these young Ivorians are watching a show that is particularly relevant to them, a show on the future of careers in the digital sector, which is ever growing in Ivory Coast.
It's always great. We make shows in public as often as possible. It's extremely interesting to see what interests them, to be in contact with them, and to see them at the end. Frankly, we come back raring to go.
RFI has chosen Abidjan as the venue for the awards ceremony of the App Challenge. It's a competition open to all internet enthusiasts across the continent. The idea is to reward the creator of a mobile application that promotes social cohesion.
We're giving young people a boost, and they're full of ideas in Africa, and digital technology makes it possible to lower the costs of entering the market and to develop projects at a lower cost. So we want to completely support this movement.
This year, the candidates had to imagine an app that would help girls get a better education. And after hours of intense deliberation, it was finally an Ivorian engineer who won with a tool that allows women to learn to read through voice help on their phones.
It's a literacy application tailored to the specific needs of the learner. We don't actually say, here, that's how we write one. We carry a message saying, for example, in an organization, it's one for all and all for one.
The first prize is a cheque of €15,000 and personalised supervision to help the winner develop her project. As for the other participants, they've had the opportunity to showcase their work in front of digital specialists interested in the young African leaders of tomorrow.
All right, that's all for this edition of Eye on Africa. Do stay tuned. More news coming up at the top of the hour.